All right, here we are on Patriots 4th and 2. Derek Havens, Steve Balestrieri. We are joined by Paul Perillo of PatriotsCom, someone I have listened to since I was 19 years old. Now I'm a 34-year-old man, so time flies.
Oh my
Paul,
God.
how are you doing, man?
Yeah. He's all grown up now, Steve.
Yeah, all grown
up.
All grown up.
Yeah, I was thinking about it the other day, Paul, when Derek said, we got you to come on. I hadn't talked to you since 2019. The last year Brady was in camp. That's when you guys had me on as a guest on Unfiltered, and I was like, wow, there's been a lot of changes since we talked last.
Yeah, he was inside the lair, Derek.
Yeah, he was deep inside. Yeah,
they had me chained to the wall and wouldn't let me.
We've seen you since then, though, like covering training camp and stuff. We had to have bumped into you since then.
No, because I had moved right after that.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
in 2020, I moved down south, and I still write for Pats fans, but I don't get to go up anymore.
But he's down in Florida. He made the move early. He made the move a couple of years early. Went to Florida.
I follow the Tom down
here. I got to follow you. I got to get out too. I mean,
now, Paul, I follow Tom down here. That's what everyone kept telling me.
Yeah. Now, Paul, I have to do this literally for you as a tribute. My wife's not going to care for it, but it is what it is. Had to pull up the Diet Miller for the interview. Okay. Just because I know you care for him, and I felt like it would be funny. But so first things first, give me your thoughts on Drake May and the draft class.
So that is the quarterback of choice for me.
It was for us too. I know that we didn't get talked before him, but it was for us too. So,
and I know a lot of people have a lot of different opinions, and no one knows how it's going to all pan out. If we all knew heading into these drafts which quarterbacks were going to hit and which ones wouldn't, we wouldn't have so many problems trying to identify them. He is the guy, though, that I thought had the best combination of skill set, while also keeping in mind this area. And by that, I don't mean the fan base or anything like that. I mean
like the weather.
The weather. Yeah, I think you need a big, strong guy, who can be physical and can drive the ball through these kinds of winds. I think that was an issue for Mac Jones, throughout his 3 years here. I think as the weather worsened, he was less and less effective. Now, obviously, by last year, it had all sort of fallen apart on him.
Right.
But I do think there were some physical limitations that Drake May will not have to worry about.
Do you think? I mean, I didn't mind Jaden Daniels. It's we don't have to get into the whole minutia of all the draft stuff because we've to steal your boy Felger's term, we've circumcised the mosquito 1,000 times. But I felt like I preferred Drake May's style more than Jaden's, specifically more because of the climate stuff. Do you agree, disagree?
I think that's part of it, yeah. And I think both of those guys, even like Caleb Williams, obviously that would have been number one. But between Daniels and May, it would have been May for me, and part of it because of that. Yeah, I do think he's a better pure passer. No question, Daniels is a better runner, more electric, more dynamic runner. But I think at some point you need to be able to do it conventionally too. And I love Lamar Jackson. I would take him on my team in a blink. The couple of MVPs, I think you can win a lot of games with Lamar Jackson. But I do think there are times when the game doesn't unfold the way they need it to, that he is not as effective.
Yeah.
So I do worry about that a little bit with Jaden Daniels. We'll see what he ends up being. But for May, I just think the ceiling is so high for him. I just think the skills are off the charts.
I watched more Arizona State games than I care to admit. I was a U of A guy, but I still have to hate watch them plenty. And I hated him. Hated him as a player.
Football.
I don't know the guy. You know how it goes. You can appreciate the hate. Okay, so there's a lot of things to like about him. I will say that I feel like he's gotten better every year, and there's a lot to like about him. But I just thought that May, just given his raw ability, I thought I'm not guaranteeing that I'm not Evan Lazar. Okay. I can't, I do spend more time on the draft than I care to, but I don't know every little detail. And if they swing and miss, I'd rather swing on a miss with that guy with that kind of talent, because I think that if he hits, that you're looking at a top, I don't know, 10 quarterback in the league. I think he has that ability.
I couldn't agree more with your summation, and that's why I felt the way I did. And I know that some people have bristled, the Josh Allen stuff, and I don't think anyone's saying that he's going to be Josh Allen.
Right. There are comparisons, but it's not like it's like.
But I think it's pretty obvious. I think the comparisons are pretty obvious. He's a big, strong guy who runs he's not just athletic and runs, but he runs kind of with a physical style the way Josh Allen does, and he can drive the ball. Does he have Josh Allen's arm? No, very few people do. But I do think there is a lot of similarities in the skill sets.
I agree.
Paul,
go ahead,
do you think age had a lot to do with? I understand that Daniels went first, but he's 24 years old, and May was only 21. I mean, everyone expects him to sit for at least a little while. Do you think age had anything to do with that?
Can I say, Paul, really quick? I'm sorry. Before you answer that, I would also say that, like, just for me, with Steve answering that is, you have the new owner for Washington. You have Adam Peters who comes over. You have Dan Quinn. So you have this whole regime here, and I feel like they are, especially with the new billionaire owner, like they're trying to like start like somebody like right away. So like Jaden Daniels makes a lot of sense because he played so many games versus like a Drake May, where like they have like a draft and develop. So to Steve's question, do you think that age is a factor, and do you think that like Elliot Wolf's and Jonathan Kraft's and Gerard Mayo's and everybody's vision up there, do you think that was more of like a, hey, we're going to build this thing slowly and get this thing back on the rails?
Yeah, it's hard to really answer for sure because you don't know who they would have taken had Daniels been available. Sure. If they had their choice of both of them, I don't know which one they would have opted for. I would like to think age had something to do with it. I like the fact that he's only 21, and I'm not writing off, the 24 season for Drake May. I'm going to take them at face value in what they talked about with Gerard Mayo and Elliot Wolf, and especially Mayo talking about getting these guys here for the spring and the OTAs, getting them into training camp and having it be a competition. I see no reason if these two guys are at all close during training camp, I see no reason why you wouldn't want to play Drake May in 2024. Now, if he shows that he is not anywhere near close to being ready, well, sure. Let's make him ready. Let's do as Derek said, the draft and develop part. And let's make sure we get the second part of that right and get him, up to speed. But I'm not a big fan of sitting for the sake of sitting. If he's better and he's showing the ability to run the offense, and that's the important thing that's going to be hard for us as just viewers of the training camp practices. We can evaluate what we actually see, but we don't know what's actually supposed to go on in every play and how many things Drake May is getting right or wrong. So that's going to be the trick for us. And what's going to happen. It happens every year. We're going to overreact to the stats during training camp, which are completely and utterly useless, but everybody's going to keep them and everybody's going to cite them and everybody's going to tweet them. And that's what's going to generate all of the talk coming out of all of those training camp practices.
And that's why I think Gerard Mayo's, I think his biggest test is going to be when it's week 7 and they're 2-4 or they're 2-5 or whatever, whatever the hell it is. And or 3-4. And then that's when you're going to start hearing the pitter patter and the whispers and the the talk radio talk about like getting Drake on the field. Like assuming Jacoby is starting right away, that's going to be Gerard's biggest test in my mind. How he handles that, because like you, if Drake is ready to go week 1, and Steve and I have talked about this before, if Drake's ready to go week 1, then start him. Like it doesn't have to be Jordan Love where he sits there like 3 years. It doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah, but I'm not a huge fan of the Green Bay comp either, and I know you weren't necessarily making it because when you have Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers is waiting, and then you have Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love is waiting, it's a whole different dynamic. You're a good team at the time, and you're going to make a deep playoff run, especially with Rodgers. Now, Favre was sort of kind of hitting the skids a little bit toward the end. He had that one final year in 2007 that they went 13-3, but they were below 500 the previous 2 seasons. So I just don't like the whole idea of, well, that's what Green Bay did and it worked for them. Well, okay,
Yeah, and as you said, I wasn't really trying to
understand.
make the comp. I was just saying that, like,
No,
I
I
just
know you
feel like
weren't. I
everybody's
feel
just like, oh, well, he's just gonna sit. Well, maybe he doesn't have to. Maybe he's ready to go.
Yeah,
It's a different
I
situation.
like the way Miami did it. With Brian Flores, who I don't think was great as Miami's head coach, but he had Ryan Fitzpatrick, sort of a similar version of Jacoby Brissett. I think Fitzpatrick probably a little bit, much better passer, but a little bit better overall quarterback
A
than
little
Jacoby
erratic, but
Brissett.
that's what
But
it is.
yeah, he was totally erratic all the time. He's the placeholder for Tua, and they actually had a winning record, but they thought Tua was ready to go. So they plugged Tua in, and they won more with Tua than they had with Ryan Fitzpatrick. So I thought that transition was done pretty well.
Yeah. What are your let's switch gears a little bit here. Well, actually, let me ask you one more draft question and then we'll move on from the draft because we've talked about it and you guys have done hours and hours and hours on that. But give me your favorite pick outside of Drake May.
So I would probably say Javon Baker, but I also like the Bell pick of the last
I love
round
the
pick.
Bell pick too. Yeah,
Just
I heard
as
Mike.
a,
I heard Mike
an
on your show the other day talk about that too.
Yeah, just as an athlete in that position, I think there's a spot probably to be earned on the roster as a third tight end. So I kind of like that. But Javon Baker, to me, when you kind of hear him talk, you might figure out why he was still around in the fourth round. He's a little bit brash, a little bold. I don't necessarily dislike that. It's going to all come down to whether or not he can play.
Hey, you've been around the team for a long time. Especially like going back to, I was really only there with Steve in like training camp situations, but like the receiver and cornerback dynamic, you got to have a different style animal there to really succeed. You got to have that edge, and he definitely has that.
Yeah, and I think that he can get himself in trouble by being a little bit too brash, but I like the skill set. I think it's a guy that can play outside the numbers, which is something they need. So that was probably the pick that I liked the most.
Okay. Yeah. No, I definitely like that. We both had kind of checked him out pre-draft, and that I do think they need an X guy, like an outside the numbers guy, like you said. That whole receiver dynamic is probably a different conversation for a different day. Steve, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Well, about the draft, was there a guy, maybe a pick that you liked the least of where they took him?
No, I like that.
Wow. Probably the Layden Robinson pick.
It's going to be the guard.
Yeah, and it's probably just because of what it means. And I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad pick. This is going to sound real sunshine.com-y, and that I don't necessarily mean it to be.
That's okay. It's okay. You're forgiven.
What my first thought was, a guard here is kind of strange. Now, I did talk to Steve Addazio a little bit about him, and I think this guy can play a little bit. So I'm not necessarily saying that Robinson's going to be a bust or he's never going to play in the league. It sounds like
Steve Addazio is the coach or the offensive line coach? Or?
He was the offensive line coach at Texas A&M, for Robinson. So he was pretty high on him. I understand that most college coaches are going to, speak glowingly about their players, but it doesn't always happen that way. I did get 2 offensive line coaches that really talked up their guys in Wallace and Robinson. But what it said to me when they picked him, Steve, was, what about Jake Andrews to go? What about City So? What about Antonio Mafi? What about Cole Strange? There's a lot of interior offensive linemen that the Patriots have chosen over the last, say, 3 drafts, and we're still looking for another young interior offensive lineman. I would have thought they felt good enough about the 4 or 5 guys they had in there. Even if David Andrews were to leave after this season, I think it's the last year of his contract. So if he retires at the end of the 24 season, I would have thought they had enough layers of depth in there that they wouldn't need to use a draft pick on that. So I kind of was disappointed by the pick because of what it told me is that maybe they're not really sold on those guys and they're looking for more competition.
Do you think it's more like, sorry, Steve, do you think it's more like personal preference on like the coaching staff, or do you think it's more like scheme related with the interior guys?
It could be one of those. It could be the zone schemes. They want to run, what they did in Cleveland, which was a lot of wide zone. Now, Evan has talked a lot about Cleveland was pretty diverse in their running game and did some gap stuff, did some zone stuff. So they weren't just married to it, but you would think on on the surface, a guy like Michael Wenu even doesn't really fit that kind of style. He's more of a bigger road grading type guy, and Robinson is too. Robinson's more of a road grader than an interior athletic.
They're both like Harbaugh linemen, not like these like Shanahan guys.
Yeah, like, that's exactly the phrase that Evan uses. They're more Harbaugh type linemen.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, at least I feel more accomplished now because
you guys can geek it up together in the basement and have.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Have your film sessions and do it up.
I was surprised by the Robinson pick as well, and at first I was like, well, maybe they don't care for the guys that were here, but at the same time, I was thinking, well, maybe he's just an added layer of insurance because Cole Strange probably won't be ready to start.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Steve. I think they do have some concerns about Cole Strange and his ability to hold up. He's been banged up as a pro. He's a little undersized. The talk when they got him is they needed to bulk him up a little bit and get him stronger. And he's been injured, so you wonder if they've been successful doing that. So that was my initial concern. And again, if it turns out that Robinson is a really good player, people aren't going to care.
Right.
They're going to say they got a good player.
Yeah.
And if they had Robinson, so much higher on their board at that time, I find that hard to believe. But maybe they stuck to their board. I just thought it was an odd pick.
The Caden Wallace thing to me was really annoying, only because they say he can be a left tackle, but they already had a good left tackle in Olu Fashanu, and for some reason Penn State thinks they have 2 left tackles, but the NFL can't find 15 decent ones. So, but whatever. But
it's a good point.
But like the Layden Robinson thing. I mean, I don't really care as much about taking interior offensive linemen in the middle of the draft. That's not going to piss me off. The Cole Strange thing pissed me off for different reasons. But
to your point, Derek, that's where you take interior offensive linemen, 4th, 5th round. There's plenty of guys that have been very successful. Guards, centers that get taken, and we don't have to talk about all the names here for the Patriots alone, but around the league.
But
so
I
agree with you. That's not going to be one of those picks that you're not going to say, I can't believe they wasted a 4th round pick on a guard. No one will ever say that.
Who really gives a shit? I mean, sorry, Miguel, but seriously, I totally get. I'm totally with you. Let me ask you this. So what do you think? I mean, and if you feel like Stacey James is gonna be like watching you on camera right now, we can just back off this. But what do you think about the whole Elliott Wolf situation? They were talking to, I believe it was Brandon Hunt from the Philadelphia Eagles. They said they were going to reevaluate that whole situation. After the draft, which is very standard for the front office positions. Like their contracts usually end right around then. I find like that whole thing kind of weird. I really think they're probably just satisfying the Rooney Rule. But I don't know. What do you think about that whole thing?
Well, I do think that it's kind of standard with personnel departments that are retained because their contracts run through the draft. And
sure,
when Bill Belichick arrived here, that's exactly what happened way back then with Bobby Greer and that whole group. So I did expect it. I expected them, because I don't think they can just say, well, Elliott Wolf is our guy. He's already been here. I don't think they can do that legally. I think they have to open up the process. And in doing so, I think you open up yourself to the parameters of the Rooney Rule. So I don't know if this is – I expect Elliott Wolf to stay here, but I'm not sure about everybody else. And I think that they might be looking to fill some various jobs. And that's nothing that I've been told or anything like that, but it's just a feel that I get. So we'll see. I mean, there was a lot of people involved in some of those pro days, with May.
Mm-hmm. A ton. They were bringing 4, 8, 9. It was very different than it used to be, where it was just like Bill and like maybe Josh.
Right. It was 8 or 9 guys, and they weren't all just coaches. So there was a lot of personnel guys that probably some of our listeners right now aren't overly familiar with. It was Elliott Wolf and Matt Groh, but it was also Patrick Stewart and Cameron Williams and some various other scouts and personnel people. So I think they're looking to sort of solidify that department a little bit. And change it over. I think it's going to be a different dynamic because I think Elliott Wolf, if that ends up being the guy, he's going to have a bigger say than that guy has had in the past. I think he probably has a bigger say right now than Nick Caserio ever did. as an
Really?
example.
Wow.
Because I think Bill Belichick was the final say.
Yeah.
And I think right now Elliot Wolf has the final say. So we're going to – I'd be curious to see how that whole interview process unfolds and where it leads. But I do think they're looking for some various jobs. I don't think it's just procedural. I think they're looking for ways to improve the personnel department.
But don't you think that's kind of like a weird, like, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Okay.
Yes.
And if you don't want to answer
It
this,
is weird,
okay.
Derek, you're
Isn't
right.
it weird? It's like a weird dynamic, though. Like,
Yeah, I'll go
like,
back
hey,
to –
we have the most important draft pick we've had since 1993, and and we'll see if you keep your job. Maybe.
I'm not huge on the most important draft. I think all drafts are important. I whatever.
I agree.
It's their first draft, and by definition, their first draft for Gerard Mayo's regime is extremely important. But
sure,
we'll see. I mean, that's a side point. Just to go back to the 2000 analogy with when Belichick got here, the thing that's odd to me, and I agree with you, Derek, is back then Scott Pioli came with Bill Belichick. Mm-hmm. Scott Pioli was basically that guy. They retained the personnel department because they had done all the work already.
Right.
And you just keep those guys through the draft. It was kind of a formality. When the draft came and went, they were going to let those people go. And that's when Bobby Greer got let go. So, but they knew Scott Pioli was already in place because he was coming with Bill Belichick. That was a new hire. So they didn't do that this time. These guys were already here. So I don't know where like Alonzo Highsmith comes into this. If he's part of the equation here with Elliot Wolf, maybe he's a guy who gets one of these roles. Once maybe there's a shakeup in the department. Again, it is an odd situation. I'd be curious to see how it unfolds.
I don't know. I don't know how Alonzo fits in everything, but I had heard through a couple of buddies who work in the media. I heard that he was very popular on the pro day trail. That he was people
he was
really
one of the 9.
Yeah, he was a very popular guy apparently. So, Steve, where do you want to go next?
Let's go to the other members of the coaching staff. Paul, we've talked pretty much ad nauseum, right, about Gerard Mayo and AVP. What's your thoughts on some of the other coaches that he's bringing in? I know these guys didn't have glowing resumes, but do you think they were all going to be able? And of course, it's strictly speculation at this point because they haven't taken the field. But do you think they'll be able to gel together as a staff?
Yeah, that's going to be hard to sort of quantify, especially now. And you're right. A lot of these guys are unknown commodities. We don't really know a lot about them. The guy that I am most excited about and probably the most encouraged about is offensive line. And
Scott Peters,
I like the tutelage. He was under Callahan, who's one of the best to ever do it in Cleveland with Bill Callahan. And I just think that he has that solid base from that. And you never know how a guy is. A lot of times the lieutenants aren't as good when they're in charge. So we'll see. But that's a spot that I'm encouraged by. He's got a lot on his plate. Like, we touched on, Caden Wallace. We're asking him to go from right tackle to left tackle. Chuks Okorafor also asking him to go from right tackle to left tackle. So there's a lot on his plate, but I'm kind of encouraged by him. I think that was a really underrated problem with the team last year was Adrian Clem and a lack of sort of cohesion on the offensive line. Obviously, talent trumps all, and they didn't have a lot of talent, with Trent Brown sort of, taking a year off on them, and you put them in a bad spot. But I don't think that was a very well-coached unit, and I think that they should be better this year, just from a fundamental schematic standpoint.
Am I a total, and you can call me a homer if you want to, am I a total homer for thinking that they've done a really good job this offseason? Like, it seems like we'll see what the draft is. I feel pretty good about the players they took. I feel Steve and I have talked a lot about the extensions for the guys that they've given, here. Am I a total homer for thinking that Elliot Wolf and Gerard Mayo have done pretty damn good this offseason?
No, you're not a homer for thinking it. I think that probably I
thought the other shoe was going to drop.
No, not at all. Like I have my list here somewhere. Because I always lose track. I like some of the re-signings. Here's where I have to put the old man glasses on. I like some of the re-signings. Okay. I liked the idea of Owenu in particular. I thought that was kind of important.
Barmore, definitely. I know you're a big Barmore guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was different. I'm talking about the free agents.
Okay. Yep.
The Barmore extension, absolutely. But they got in a situation where they basically had to retain Hunter Henry because they didn't have a tight end on the roster.
Right.
Kendrick Bourne didn't love that re-signing. I'd rather see them try to boost that room a little bit.
But what about the Kendrick thing that you really didn't like? Because I remember you saying this at the time on Unfiltered. And I'm not really on this, honestly. I really it's really neither here nor there. But I'm just kind of curious. Like I feel like he's like a good third or fourth receiver. Like, do you think he was just paid more than what he should have been, or like what are your thoughts?
I mean, he didn't break the bank, but he's paid more than a third or fourth receiver. First of all, but I don't really, as you know, that I don't really care about the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers don't matter.
Yeah, unless they're ridiculous. And you give a guy $30 million to be a fourth receiver. All right, let's. I'm not going to tell you it never matters, but if he got a couple million more than he should have gotten, I don't think that's going to break the bank. I just would like to have seen them say we can do better than that. This is a guy that's been around a couple of years. He hasn't really made a huge impact on our offense. Our offense has been terrible since he's been the best receiver on it. So I'd like to be able to see if we could get outside and do better. I think they went after Calvin Ridley. I would have liked to have seen them land that kind of a player instead of going back to the re-signing. But I like Owenu. Obviously, Henry had to be done. And I liked the message that the Duggar re-signing sent. So I did like some of what they did in the offseason. I didn't need all of the guys back, which kind of ended up being the way that it turned out. Josh Uche, I didn't necessarily need him back. I know.
Yeah, but the money was so small that it was
just nothing deal. He didn't have any options. I know that there's been a lot made of, well, he turned down more money elsewhere. Yeah, okay, whatever. I don't buy that. I never buy that. So Anthony Jennings. Fine. I did like the message that it sent, that Wolf and Mayo were telling their young guys, if you come in and work hard and play at a good level, you're not necessarily going to be dismissed if you're looking for the big contract. So, I think Michael Owenu absolutely would have been re-signed by Bill Belichick. I think that's a Bill Belichick. He just did it with Shaq Mason, 4 or 5 years
I don't think Kyle Duggar
before.
would have been here, though, if Bill was still on the team.
Kyle Duggar probably wouldn't have been because they have a lot of depth at that spot. With a lot
and
of
I think he drafted Marte Mapu for that same thing, even though I would rather have him play linebacker, but whatever.
Right. So that is, but they also have Peppers, who kind of is a similar kind of player. So I think that's what Bill likes to do, is sort of get a guy who's not going to cost the same as the guy who's kind of doing the same. So I do look at, even though I would say that maybe on the football field, some of the guys that they re-signed were, they didn't have to. I love the message that it sends. Here's a bunch of draft picks. You're all looking for your second contract. They haven't had a lot of guys get a second contract recently. I thought, Jennings, Uche, Duggar, Owenu, that's a lot of guys getting a second contract. I think that sends a great message in the locker room.
I thought it was a clear point of emphasis for this new regime to do that. I think it was they clearly got together and were like, well, why do you think that is, by the way? And again, anything you don't want to answer, you don't have to, but why do you think that is, with Bill? Because it was Logan Ryan, who was the last first, second, or third round draft pick, who got a second contract in 2013 or whatever the hell it was. Why do you think it took so long?
The biggest thing from Bill is, and listen, there's no one that has more respect for Bill than me.
Well, I do too, but I still
he drafted like crap for 10 years.
Yeah.
Give me the guy that he let walk in the first couple of rounds that you said, was N'Keal Harry supposed to get a second contract? Isaiah Wynn? Sony, these guys, the guys weren't worth a second contract. Like I said, you go back and it wasn't automatic that a guy wasn't going to get it. Nate Solder got a second contract, as a first round pick, back when, because he played at a higher level than Isaiah Wynn did.
So I was just talking to a buddy.
Bill,
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, just saying the problem with Bill, I think in recent years was the drafting really got away from them. And I think that they had some really poor drafts. And for that reason, I think a lot of those guys really weren't worthy of second contracts.
it started at Bill. I was just talking to a couple of buddies of mine who aren't fans of the Patriots, and I was just talking to them about this. Bill drafted almost lights out for his first, I don't know, 12, 13 years. Like he was really good. Like people don't realize that like that whole second dynasty, like the same dynasty but second run they had was because they literally crushed it in the draft like 4 years in a row. It's why the Bills have been so good. The Jets, I mean the Dolphins, they've been all drafting so well. That's why they're so good all of a sudden. They couldn't get out of their own friggin' way for the longest time. The Patriots started drafting, it was like right around the Dominic Easley and Malcolm Browns, and you go down the list and it was just like, I mean, they had they drafted Joe Tooney in the 3rd round. That was a great pick. But aside from that, the draft has been terrible for years. That's part of the reason they kind of ended up in this situation. I
couldn't agree more. And the ones that they did hit, as you just said, Tooney, they're hitting on interior alignment. Shaq Mason and Tooney were hits. Like, those are important, don't get me wrong, but you're not going to win or lose based on those kinds of picks.
Yeah. Good. Steve stepped away for a hot second.
What was the last thing you wanted to ask me about?
I just wanted to ask you about the roast the roast of Brady. I just was curious on your thoughts on it.
I actually didn't see it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm like the only person in New England that didn't see it.
I was honestly not sure how it was going to go. It was actually pretty damn good. I was mildly surprised.
From what I've heard, the clips that I've heard, the Nikki Glaser stuff was excellent.
Oh my God, she was
hilarious.
She kicked ass and took names. Like she was.
I thought from what the clips that I've heard played, whether it be on Twitter or the radio, whatever, it was pretty funny. And I know not everybody, but I would say 95% of people seem to have really gotten a lot of enjoyment out of it. I just wasn't really all that interested in it Sunday night. Didn't really have it on my radar. And then everybody talking about it on Monday, I was like, well, I really missed something here. So I'll have to, double back and figure out, maybe when maybe when the Bruins and Celtics are done,
I'll
watch it.
Yeah. What do give me your thought? I mean, if you want, you don't have to, but I mean, this is obviously a Patriots show, but B's and C's, what do we think? I thought I think the end of the Bruins series kind of gave them a jolt in the ass for the first game. I wasn't quite expecting them to go like 5-1 against Florida. I was pretty nervous about the series. The Celtics, I feel like, should waltz to the finals, but we'll see if they can, mature and get their head out of their ass. Give me your thoughts on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Celtics are head and shoulders better than anybody, so I'd be very disappointed if they didn't at least get to the final, but probably I would be just as disappointed if they didn't win the final. I think they're better than the competition. I think they have enough options so they can withstand a bad shooting night, because it's hard to imagine that 4-5 guys are going to have a bad shooting night altogether 4 times. I'm not saying that they'll never lose a game, but to me, if they're going to lose games to these teams, Cleveland, Knicks, it's going to be what Miami did. They're going to make 23 threes one night. It's going to be, one of those things, and you're going to lose. My one concern with them is a close game. I don't think they play the same plus or minus 5 and, down the stretch. So I don't think that there'll be 4 close games in one series. But if there is, I'd be a little bit concerned. The Bruins, I think. Bruins are a fine, solid team. I don't look at them as being as talented as, say, the Rangers or Carolina.
Yep.
We'll see.
I agree. No, I agree with all that.
They can beat Florida, though. They can absolutely beat Florida.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Well, hey, I'm just going to do the outro for the show real quick, and then we can, we'll talk offline for a second. But I just want to thank everyone for listening to Patriots 4th and 2. We have Paul Perillo joining us. I appreciate your time, Paul. Steve and I know Steve stepped away for a second, but we were looking forward to doing this and getting your thoughts. So I appreciate your time, and we will talk to you guys next week.